Hi everybody out on Facebook, how you doing today? I'm James Markley here again with Hal Gainey, and we're here to talk to you about how VoIP can save you money. We plugged it last week, we told you we were going to talk about it, so now we're going to talk to you a little bit about how VoIP saves money. There's really two elements to it. One of them is capital expense, save that money up front. Don't have to worry about amortizing things across the next 5 years. You don't have to worry about this whole concept of I'm trying to start my business up and now I've got to go buy a phone system. And then the other side of that is the operating expense. How much are you paying per month? And we're going to talk about both of those. Thank you for joining us today, Hal.
Thank you for having me again. I appreciate it.
So, we were kind of batting some stuff around at the beginning, talking about capital expense. I know when I worked for a large national franchisee for a while, and we used to buy Nortel Northstar systems. I was looking to see if Hal cringed a little bit.
I installed those. Yeah, we used to call those the big chunks of money. That's what those were. Yeah.
But they were like tanks. You could just the phones could fall on the ground. Nothing happened to them. You kick them. They could do everything.
They were, and we actually had to build a room specifically dedicated to our phone system at that time.
Oh, did you? Yeah. So an example, in just going into my own personal experience, when we did Nortel systems, you had the initial, PBX purchase, usually about $4,000 to $5,000 just for the actual box that got mounted on the wall. Purchase of a handset or a phone was about $150 to $200 a phone on top of that. So when all was said and done, you were spending, $7,500, to $10,000 for maybe 10 phones in total with a PBX to get your company up and running.
And then you got to pay for the service to come in.
Right. And that doesn't even get into that part, which is the OpEx.
Right.
So I think one of the things that VoIP really does a great job at is it eliminates all of that up front. And right off the bat, you're eliminating all of the hardware purchase. You're eliminating, all of the PBX infrastructure. And instead, what you're doing is you're going to a provider like DataTech, and you're saying, okay, well, hey, I need a phone system, and they say, hey, cool, we can build you one. It's going to be all in the cloud. You don't have to worry about it. All you got to do is take this phone and plug it into a network jack somewhere that has internet access.
Yeah.
It's that simple. So some of the things we were talking about on the capital expense side, and it does add up for you business owners out there, is expansion cards as an example. You need more lines. How often has that happened to you? Maybe you're calling, you go and you say, okay, well, when I started my company, I bought it and it had capacity to make 4 phone calls out at a time. My phone system did. And I thought that was going to be great, but now I have 25 people that work for me and we need to make 8 phone calls at a time. And somebody comes and says, well, you've got to buy another 4-line expansion card. And there's a cost. Right?
Yeah, well, in the days of Nortel, you use that as an example. Those cards cost an arm and a leg. So.
Right.
But yeah, now, today you're just basically talking about, instead of lines kind of vanish when you start talking about VoIP. There are no finite number of lines you have. There are simply number of calls that you license to make simultaneously at the same time. So if you have about 20 phones in your location, we find that about an 8-call license is going to handle most of your calls at the same time. But it's scalable up or down to suit your needs.
Right.
And that means that you have 8 calls that happen at the same time. You don't have to worry.
Right.
About that. You're able to make them all 8 at the same time.
Right. I think one of the really neat things on that too, when you talk about scalable, is how fast it can be scaled up too.
Yeah.
When you talk about old phone systems, if your phone system was lagging behind, and you needed a new feature or you needed, expansion, you needed to make more lines. You had to order the equipment, you had to wait for that to get shipped to you, you had to schedule an installer, which cost you more money.
And it also shut down your phone system while all that was happening.
Right, and now you can do that.
Yeah, I just get a 64-bit code and I plug it in, and the next thing you know, your call paths have increased. So.
Right, so instantly, you make that phone call to us, you say, I need to upgrade. There may or may not be a cost associated with it, just depends. We have to look at your individual account, but once you say I want to make that upgrade change, it's a matter of just turning around and basically applying that code, and they rock and roll.
That's it.
No interruption to the phone system, no interruption to your current calls that are going on right then and there, nothing.
Right.
So, we also talked a little bit about, I kind of alluded to it, maintenance. I know when I worked in previous industries, and a phone system went down, it went down.
Yeah.
There was no, you had to wait until your tech got out there.
Yeah, and that is a big difference when you start talking about cloud hosted voice, is that all of the equipment that is making your calls happen, they live in our data center, or they live in a co-hosted location that we may have in another part of the country. And as far as the actual equipment on site, it's scaled down to practically nothing.
Right.
There is, in most cases, a singular device at each location that is making a connection back to here.
Mm-hmm.
All the phones at that location are looking at that device on how to get back to here. So, no longer will you have a noisy closet that is full of, antiquated equipment, that when you need to make changes, you need
Right.
to call a specific vendor
Right.
who comes out and they bill you per
Right.
hour to change a name on an extension.
Right.
We do all of that, remotely.
Right.
We do it a lot of times while we're on the phone with the customer. And for 99% of all moves, adds, and changes to the phone system, we don't charge for that.
Right.
Now,
I think I was going to add to that. I know that a lot of business owners out there, you may have sat down with your repair guy for your phone system at one point, and he may have given you a CD with some software on it and installed it on your computer and said, all you have to do is go in here and click on these 5 different menu options and dig this deep, and then that's where you can change the extension name. You shouldn't have to do that. That's not, but on the same token, you shouldn't have to feel like you're going to have to build every time that you're reaching out for assistance with your phone system, because employment changes, things like that.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the big benefits, is that you don't have to be a telephone system repair guy for yourself to make
No.
extension changes anymore. Now you have somebody to reach out to that's going to take care of that, and it's all covered in that cost. You don't have an additional cost.
Yeah, and it'll vary from customer to customer. Some customers like to have some level of administrative control. They want to be able to change the name of an extension
Right.
if an employee comes on board or
Right.
leaves, or they can just call us and we take care of that for them. But
Right.
that is the nice thing about VoIP, is that we can give that administrative control to those that want it just through a web page.
Right, right. So we can go into some of the operating expense savings. I know that's usually what you see. You go all over the internet, you look for VoIP, and they tell you they're going to save you. It's going to be cheaper per minute, and all this other stuff. I know one of the things that we were talking about, even before we get into the minute discussion, is right off the bat, it's going to be cheaper on communication taxes.
Yeah.
I mean, right off the bat.
Let's just take an example from the past. Let's say you had a simple 4-line phone system. You were
Right.
paying for 4 lines from one of your, from your telecom provider. Let's just say Verizon. We'll use them as an example. Well,
Because
if you
they don't
want-
exist anymore.
Right. If you wanted call waiting on that, you had to pay for the service. If you wanted to have 3-way calling, you had to pay for the service. And guess what? Each time that you add a service, it's going to increase your cost. And guess what? That also increases your taxes.
Right.
And then let's even talk about long distance charges.
Right.
If you had an older phone system with lines, you were paying long distance charges. None of that exists with VoIP.
Right, right.
A call is a call is a call to wherever you make it. There are no additional calls except for international rates. If you need international calling on your phone system, then we set that up, and it's
Right.
just it's a block of minutes that you think you may need to use a month.
Right. One of the things I noticed, even though on the international side, was that the international rates are usually drastically cheaper too.
I don't know how they make money doing
Yeah,
it.
I mean
honestly.
it's because they're basically just pulling the call across the internet and then dumping it somewhere in a local provider, so they get to bypass all those exchanges and everything along the way.
Right. It's not going all under the bottom of the Atlantic
Right. Right.
sea as it used to be. Now it's
Right.
going up to satellites in space.
Yeah. So I know that that's one of the big cost savings you'll see there: international calling and communications, taxes. But the other thing is just even the per minute. If you look at the way we block it, I know we
Yeah.
block it. We do it in blocks of minutes. And the blocks that you buy of minutes are just so drastically cheaper than what you would pay previously when you looked at it. Because in the VoIP world, just so that Facebook public knows, there's really a couple different elements to it. There's the equipment side of it. There's the service side of it. The service side of it encompasses kind of like the hardware solutions and cloud computing elements that are required to run that phone system, where we run it and everything. But that all comprises into a monthly bill. That's how that all gets configured and calculated, so that way you get one bill that you pay. In the telco world, going back to telco, when you had a service provider like Verizon, which we can use because they're not in business anymore, they brought a service into the building, but they didn't cover anything else once it got into the building. Right. And the cost that you ended up paying was for the services that they were offering for your telephone system, versus being a cost for an all-inclusive type of service, which is what VoIP ends up being.
Right. And that varies month to
right.
month depending on your calling too.
Right.
I mean, as you can imagine, depending on the long distance charges that you might apply.
Right.
To the calls, but and so that was kind of one of the things that was a moving target every month, was how much is our phone system going to be. Typically with VoIP, as long as you're within your allocated shared minutes for your network, your bill is the same every month.
Right. And typically, I know what we end up seeing once you add the feature sets in and everything else. The feature sets don't cost additional on our side. When you add them in from the telco side, what they would pay on their telephone bill, we're able to compare apples to apples, and we end up with 15 or 20% savings just right off the bat sometimes.
Just
that's before you even walk into where am I calling in the world, how often am I spending time on the phone, what's my capital expense. It's just that's the pure telephone bill side. Right. So the other thing we kind of were talking about a little bit too was increasing the capabilities of your employees in terms of scaling. When we talked about our soft phone, we were talking about this before we got on. When you have a VoIP solution, you don't have to have a physical phone sitting on everybody's desk, which can be a benefit too sometimes. Part of the benefit of a VoIP solution is that with our 3CX solution that we offer, you're going to have a soft phone application. That application can be used anywhere in the world as long as you have an internet connection that's reasonably fast. When I say reasonably fast, let's just say 10 megabits or something like that, and you can also do that inside your own company too. If you're in a call center type environment, maybe you don't want to have phones sitting on everybody's desk. Maybe
you can use your iPad as a phone.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. So, when you look at this overall as a whole, between capital expense and operating expense, there's significant cost savings on both sides of the spectrum. We're going to make it as minimally impactful to you to implement this in your organization in terms of cost, because you don't have to go out and buy all this hardware. That's the first part.
Yeah.
I think the second part really is that once you look at that monthly bill coming to you every month, it's going to be lower than what you're used to paying.
Yeah. Well, and even to take it just a step farther.
Yeah.
Companies that have multiple locations can start enjoying immediate savings. Typically, if a company has multiple locations, they have to have phone service brought into each one of those locations, and a lot of times it's not even the same vendor.
Right.
So you've got different locations that have different features and abilities that can't even talk to each other.
Right.
Internally. They have to make calls. So if I'll give you an example. Let's say that one of your locations wanted to call the home office.
Right.
And it's a long distance call. Well, they're going to get charged to make a long distance call to talk to their office.
Right.
In the world of VoIP, all of the locations are centrally tied together. So one, management is a lot easier.
Right.
Two, inter extensions.
Right.
Calling extension to extension is basically free.
Right.
And also the ability to grow your locations just becomes that much easier.
Yeah,
All we do is ship 5 phones to a new location, pre-configured,
right.
and they plug them in and they work.
Right. Just a real quick number for you. We'll choose 3 locations as an example. I know kind of the old, we were talking about T1 connections a minute ago. The old misnomer, the old telco verbiage was it's about $400 a month for a T1 connection.
Yeah, I always equate
you multiply
T1 with money. I don't know why I do that.
Well, yeah, a T1
super
connection.
expensive.
Yeah, you had T1 connection for your phone system, and you ended up having 400 times 3 locations. You're at $1,200 a month just for your phone service. Let's say you have 5 lines at each location. It's 15 lines. Going to a VoIP product is going to cut that bill in half. I can tell you right now.
Well, and then you run out of
right.
channels to
Yeah,
use. A
yeah.
T1 has a limit.
Yeah, yep. So if you're interested in finding out more about our VoIP, how we can save you money, please comment on our Facebook Live video and let us know, or reach out to sales@datatechitp.com. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next week.